Yeah,
All right, we're live.
good. Yes, we are. Now you want to start the countdown,
All righty, so I'm going to share my screen,
right?
and here we go.
Perfect.
And I've got my mouse out of the way, so that little
Yeah.
timer bar should go away. There we go.
Perfect, Emmy. Right on time.
All right, we're live.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Good.
hearing my
Yes, we are. Now you want to start. Oh, okay. So you want to close that window that's
screen.
right? Or is that on my computer?
Go.
Perfect.
I'm getting.
See the delay.
Hold on a second. You probably can yeah, let me close that window. For some reason, it opened up the live stream window. I don't know why it does that, but anyway, I took care of it.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so I am gonna. All right. I had this window open. There, it shows that there are three. Well, I know there are more than three, a handful, but I'm going to close this window and open up the question window. So we're no longer getting any feedback, and people will start joining. See, once we go live, you may know this, the announcements get sent out to all of the subscribers who have requested announcements.
Yes, yes. I think people are coming on here, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that there is about a 30-second delay, like you said, between the Zoom transmission to YouTube, because the timer on our end is a little bit different time than what's happening on YouTube right now, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So yeah, some people asked if there's a topic for today, and it can be whatever burning questions people have on their minds.
Yeah.
It's a new thinking aloud, or about us hosting, or a good stock to invest in. I'm just kidding.
Okay. I will make sure my phone doesn't ring.
Yes, I've got mine silenced as well. See, somebody's joining from London. Hello, London, and everybody else. Sweden.
Oh, are you looking at the chat window?
I am.
Okay.
I won't do that the whole time, but while we got the timer going and we're just texting here. I also just want to say I'm grateful for all of the moderators. I'm often the one on the back end with Laura, Jim, Celia, Michael, Elizabeth. So thank you all for being with us and helping us today with fielding the questions to Jeff and I.
Elizabeth can't access the Zoom. That's the Zoom for the moderators.
Yeah, I would imagine they're going to probably communicate on Slack to help her get that login for, I think Celia is hosting the Zoom today.
Oh, okay.
For the moderators, yeah. South America, Colombia. Hello.
Now, I have to ask Laura what she means by impartial.
Are you looking on the Google Doc?
I'm looking on the Google Doc. Yeah, there are questions. Laura's posted a couple of questions.
Oh, maybe she means neutral.
Yeah, I think I'm positive, not neutral.
Maybe Laura, maybe you could clarify your question for Jeff. What you mean by impartial? Maybe meaning that you don't, you're usually, you allow the guests to share their views and express their views without you maybe taking a stance on if you agree or not all the time. I imagine she'll clarify for you.
Okay. Well, there's some good questions coming in.
So, hello from Virginia, Shenandoah Valley Mountains. People all over the world joining. What a treat.
Yeah.
You've done such a great job, you and your guest, Jeff, building up a community all around the globe.
Well, I'd like to think maybe we're just getting started.
Oh, that's beautiful. The potentials are unlimited and ever expanding.
But I do realize now that you pointed it out to me, we're coming on 8 years.
Wow. Congratulations, Jeff. It's fantastic.
And over 165 consecutive weeks in which the newsletter has been released.
Yeah, excellent. Always a treat to get that newsletter. It's always so beautiful and informative.
And you've been a big help with the newsletter too.
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm happy to assist. I think you've caught me off of the tail end of me publishing my own book that you wrote a beautiful forward for. No, really. And I went through that book with the editors with a fine-tooth comb to try to get all the typos out. And I actually there were 12 typos I learned in my book when I recorded the audio for it. And then I was able to upload a new PDF. So the current version should be a little bit less, but that's all part of that. Sometimes those happen. Hello to and from Ireland. From and to Ireland. Great. All right, we just got a couple more minutes here.
You know what I think I might do, Emmy, is you know how we begin lots of our other meetings with a little invocation.
Yeah.
I think that might be nice. A nice way to begin this.
Okay.
I think I'll ask you to lead a short invocation.
I'll be happy to do that. Yeah, very brief. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to see all the people joining around the world. Everybody's own center of their own universe.
Okay, 1 minute to go.
All righty. Yes. Ready or not, people, here we come.
Okay, welcome everybody. We are live. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, and I'm here with my co-host today, Emmy Vadnais. We don't have a topic scheduled. We're willing to field any questions you have whatsoever about anything. We have a team of volunteers, moderators, as we have every week live stream program, who are selecting the best of the questions that get posed in the live stream chat. And Emmy and I will take turns addressing your questions to the best of our ability. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Emmy to lead us in a brief invocation. This is something we normally do when we have our coordinators meetings for the channel. And I think it helps to set a beautiful, centered, and balanced tone for our meetings. So, Emmy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. So, since it is here in North America anyway, summertime, and we'll just do a brief centering meditation. I've got fresh cut flowers from my garden today. If you are in a stationary room somewhere, if you just want to go ahead and maybe close your eyes and just take a nice breath in and out. If you happen to be driving or engaging in any activity that needs your full attention, you just want to continue what you're doing or look off on the horizon and just go ahead and take a nice breath in and out. And take a moment to connect with the heavens or the sky above you. Perhaps warm sunlight or blue sky. And connecting with the gentle pull of Earth's gravity below you. And allow that beautiful sky energy, or it could be a star at night, and allow that to just move into your body, down into your heart. Just visualizing that, even if you feel like you're making it up, just imagining that moving into your heart, and also imagining that nice earth energy coming up through your legs, the center of your body, and straight up into your heart. And if you would like, visualize and feel these energies meeting and mixing within you, the yin and the yang. If you want, you can visualize something beautiful at the center of your heart, which already your heart is beautiful. So you can just stay with that and that feeling of your love, even if you have any grief or sorrow, just diving deep into the core of that love and light of who you are. And if you want, you can visualize maybe a beautiful flower or rose, or maybe the rainbow yin yang. And just feeling the harmony and the oneness of these two seemingly polar opposite energies, balancing and centering you in love and light.
Great. Thank you, Emmy.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I will pose the first question to you. It's from one of our moderators, Celia Funk, who asks you, Emmy, how did you get introduced to New Thinking Aloud the first time?
Well, I actually have been a fan of Jeff and his guests since the mid-1980s, believe it or not, since you originally had your public television series. And so I developed my love of and was drawn to intuition. And over the years, I created my own podcast, Healing Connections. And Jeff, I invited you to be a guest on that. I think that was in 2018, if I remember correctly, 5 years ago. And so Jeff was a guest on my podcast. And then you made a call for volunteers, and I saw the video and I contacted you and started volunteering with you. And Jeff, do you want to share and then it just kind of grew from there, really. And then you won the essay competition and needed some more support.
Yeah, no, you've always been right there. But besides that, you've written an excellent book on intuition, and I invited you actually, I sent out a notice to all the volunteers, if I remember correctly, asking if anyone would like to be a guest host. And you stepped right up. And I think after you'd done a few dozen, one of the viewers wrote to me and said, Emmy has been doing so many good interviews as a guest host. Don't you think it's time she became the co-host?
Yes, and we were just noticing it's almost been a year now since I've been co-hosting. It'll be a year this August.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you wrote a beautiful foreword for my book, and thank you for that, my intuitive development book. Yeah. And then I've interviewed you like 3 times. You've interviewed me. So yeah, I think I've done over almost 60, I think, interviews now and meditations for New Thinking Aloud. So it's a great joy, and I'm learning so much. It's amazing how much there is to continue to learn, which keeps life interesting for sure.
Okay, do you want to select one of the questions?
Let's see. Okay, here's one for you, Jeff. Let's see, who is it? This is also from Celia. What is the process for finding new guests to interview? Okay,
that is an interesting process because there is no particular process. Sometimes we reach out to potential guests because we notice they have a new book out. Very often they reach out to us for that reason. Many times we want to do multiple interviews with people who have already been interviewed on this channel. We're looking for the very most credible people that we can find in the area of the paranormal, which, according to mainstream institutions, it's not a credible area at all. And they're wrong about that. And from my point of view, what we're trying to share with our viewers is a whole culture, a culture of consciousness, a culture of psychic development and psychic exploration and the use of intuition. And that's why we keep putting out several videos every single week, is to try and help immerse our audience in this wonderful culture, which has been central to my life for the last half century.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to find a question for you, Emmy. This is from Paul Leslie, who's been a guest on New Thinking Aloud. And he asks, in what way is New Thinking Aloud helping you fulfill some aspect of your own sense of purpose in life?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Hi, Paul. So good to connect with you. You and I both, Jeff, have had the pleasure of interviewing Paul. Well, for me, it ever expands my deeper connection to the oneness that we all share. I would say every interview, every guest, there's a theme around that. And it brings me joy and makes me feel love and hope for all of us, that there's this deeper connection that we frequently forget about, or we can become disillusioned because of things we read in the news, or maybe the way somebody has treated you in your life. So for me, it is always positive and always lifts my spirit. And also I'm refining my skills, as an interviewer, and video editing skills and all of that. So there's, all those things that come with it as well. How about you, Jeff? How has it helped you in your life?
Well, gosh, now that I think about it, it's an opportunity for me to give back to the world the incredible contacts that I have had with the community of people in parapsychology, consciousness, and human potential. I get so much back from the viewers who write to me and say things like, you don't know how much this has been of benefit to me. That's what keeps me going. And, I don't even think too much about what am I getting out of it at this point. It's just become a passion, and it's like, you can't stop me.
Yeah, your love keeps growing and expanding as you give, then others give to you, and it keeps just, this cycle keeps rolling. And I would also just add what you're saying, Jeff, that the reason I even started writing my book or wanted to, had my own podcast, and now I'm so grateful to team up with you, is exactly that, is to help expand all of our awarenesses and our consciousness of what's possible. And I'm grateful that I can, share this platform with you, Jeff, or you've shared it with me, really, to help really highlight other people's messages as well, which are very much in alignment with the mission of New Thinking Aloud.
Here's a question from a viewer named Chris Scarpantonio. I'm going to ask this of you, Emmy. Okay. What are your opinions on the increased content, I think he means the increased amount of reports in the media of public UFO sightings?
Well, I think that, what do I think about that it's happening? Like, why is it happening? Or,
Well, what they say often on the news channel, what do you make of that?
Well, Jeff, you have been talking about this with your guests since the 1980s. I recall you talking about this. So I think that what's happening is, I think that there's a thinning of the boundaries of our awareness of what's happening. And I think that more information is coming out from multiple sources. And I think we're getting closer to the quote, what's going on, which I don't know if there's one answer as to what's going on. I certainly don't have the answer, but I think that there might be multiple answers. But I think we're getting closer. And I thank you, Jeff, and your guests over the years where you have been continually asking these questions. And recently you just had Robert Bigelow on, and he even shared some more information. That was a great interview that just came out, The Making of a Paranormal Investigator. If people haven't watched that, check that out. So what do you think, Jeff? You've been at this longer than I have. That's a great question for you.
Yeah, well, I guess it's fair to say that reports of UFO activity have been ongoing since I was a young child. I remember as a 10-year-old child reading all the UFO books in the library. And for so long, it seemed as if the government had an official policy of debunking these reports. And I'm under the impression that policy was largely based on protecting itself, because the government doesn't know what's going on, and they didn't want to necessarily admit that because it would make people nervous. And there was also some concern about, ever since the Orson Welles broadcast of H.G. Wells' novel War of the Worlds, that caused something of a tying up of all the phone lines when people thought we were really being invaded by Mars. I think the government felt that they didn't want to create any public panic. Now, I'm under the impression we're beyond that now. It's not as if anybody in the government or elsewhere really has a good handle on what's really taking place. But at least there's no longer a felt need to ridicule and debunk the reports that come through. Although it is true, to my understanding, that maybe as many as 80% of the supposed UFO sightings that are reported can be explained conventionally. That still leaves 20% or so that defy explanation. And I think gradually, over time, the general public is becoming accustomed to the idea that we are not alone, and that the human race may be very slowly and hesitatingly getting ready to enter into the community of space traveling civilizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there could be multiple things going on, maybe not just one source. So, Jeff, you have interviewed so many people, and one of the viewers is asking, this is Badger Matt 1, their YouTube name, is asking, does Jeffrey have any thoughts on the late, great Joseph Campbell? What was it like meeting him personally? And any thoughts and insights you have on him or that experience of conversing with him?
Yeah, it's been many years now since I interviewed Joseph Campbell. He was a wonderful man and very passionate. And I do remember really specifically at the end of our interview, I asked him, what advice would you give to the young people who are watching this program today? And he said unequivocally, follow your passion. Mm-hmm. Do the things that you love, and basically the money will follow. But if you start chasing after money, and of course we all need a certain amount of money to handle our basic needs, people get caught in a kind of rat race. And it's dispiriting. It's not good for the soul, actually. So I know a lot of people will say that's nice for you. I remember when I was a youngster, myself, in fact, I was with my father and an older cousin, and they were saying, well, what do you want to do with your life? I was maybe 18. And I said, I think I want to travel. And they started shaking their heads like, well, that's very nice, but you can't do that. Here's what's going to happen. They say, you're going to get married, you're going to have children, and then you're going to have to get a job to support your family. And so travel will be out of the question. And I think a lot of people kind of have that attitude, but Joseph Campbell put it differently. And I think when people do follow their passion, they become more soulful. And I happen to think that the world will be a better place when more and more people are in touch with their inner being, you could say, their soul.
Well, and that's what you've been about all these years, is all about helping people to cultivate their inner knowing, their intuition, which is a big theme here of New Thinking Aloud as well.
Yeah, it is. Okay, let's see what other questions. Firefly is a viewer who says, I am an intense, aggressive person. I wonder, has something happened in my previous incarnation that has made me such an intense person? And they would like to take a stab at that?
Yeah, well, I think that my best suggestion would be to meditate on what causes you to feel so intense or aggressive. Like, what is it that, is it a communication with an individual? Is it how you operate in all aspects of your life, or does it only occur in certain settings or with certain people? And kind of maybe get a little bit more clarity around what is it that has you feeling that way. Now, it could just be that I'm a fan of astrology. I am also a fan of reincarnation. I'm not exactly sure how all of that works, but I'm very convinced that at least some people, especially we know with like research from Ian Stevenson and many of the guests Jeff has had on, that reincarnation is very real. So it could be that, that aggression, first of all, doesn't always have to be a quote, a bad thing. It could be that you are blessed with a lot of energy. Because I think in astrology, I think of the planet Mars, which is really shows how we go forward and the qualities of how we take action. And so it could be a matter of exploring how to harness that energy. And so if things are having you want to react in sort of a negative way, is there a wound from your past? Now, it could be that you could discover that in a past life. I will say that in my experience, everything that's happened in a previous life that still needs attention will come into this lifetime. So if you, let's say that there was some wound in a past lifetime, let's say that your father didn't treat you very well. Well, in this lifetime, it's likely that your father didn't treat you well as well. So then it's a matter of looking at those wounds and maybe doing some mindfulness meditation or something, maybe getting a therapist, doing some work with that. And then looking at that energy and how you can use that energy, like Jeff and I here, right? We have clearly we have a lot of strong mental capacities. We like to read, we like to talk, we like to communicate. And so I'm able to channel some of that energy here with all of you today. So then it's how can you take some of that energy and channel it into something positive in your life? So that would be my best advice. Do you have any thoughts, Jeff? I know that you know a lot about this field of reincarnation, and you've also worked as a professional psychotherapist as well. Not that we're giving therapy. We can't say that we're giving therapy, but we have some ideas in that realm.
Well, it's interesting that you're showing a degree of self-knowledge by indicating that you know that you're an intense, aggressive person, and you want to understand what the cause of it is. And of course, you can look towards your past, your childhood in this lifetime, or even to previous lifetimes. Past life therapy can sometimes be very useful, regardless of whether it's the past life that you come up with in a therapeutic context is validated or not. But the thought that keeps coming to me, Firefly, is about being in the here and now, not worrying so much about the past, but dealing with your feelings and your urges in the moment. Because that's the only way you're going to actually address them, is in the here and now.
Yes, exactly. Well said, Jeff. Yeah. Yeah. And having interviewed Dr. David Hanscom, who talked about intrusive thoughts, sometimes when we judge ourselves for the ways that we might have a certain temperament, or we have certain, quote, gifts or challenges, and sometimes our gifts, our strengths can be our weaknesses, and our weaknesses can be our strengths, that we can judge those parts of ourselves. But like Jeff and I are suggesting, if you can, and you have, noticed that about yourself, but be gentle with yourself around it, versus being maybe aggressive towards yourself with your aggression, because that can just kind of get you in a juggernaut and have you fighting with yourself. So bringing a little bit more compassion and space to that could help evolve that for you. So here's a fun question. This is from Ron Thomas, and Ron asks, what is your song choice for today's karaoke selection? So when Jeff and I did a live stream a while ago, we joked about singing a karaoke song together. And I have to say, I actually prepared some song titles, and y'all can listen to these song titles and you can vote on what you think Jeff and I could sing together. So here's the first one: Spirits in the Material World by The Police, Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell, Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, Hypnotized by Fleetwood Mac, Dreamweaver by Gary Wright, Send Me an Angel by the Scorpions, Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann's The Earth Band, Higher Love by Steve Winwood, Itchy-Coo Park by the Small Faces, Who Are You by The Who, and 5D by the Birds. Those are just themes of New Thinking Aloud.
That's a big selection. Okay. I'm not familiar with most of those, but yeah. Do you like to sing, Emmy?
I do. I can't. I'm no professional, but I have sung in choirs, and I used to sing doing theater. I would sing doing acting in school and community theater years and years ago, though.
Okay. Well, maybe someday we'll do a duet.
That would be fun. Yeah. It doesn't have to be one of those songs. I was just trying to be funny with those titles, because those are all New Thinking Aloud themes. So So thank you for the question, Ron. You were planted you must have got my psychic connection there. I was hoping somebody would ask about karaoke. That's funny.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here.
All right, Jeff, here's one for you. Howard Langston.
Yeah.
It says, Jeffrey, your commitment to positivity is contagious through the screen. It's inspirational. I would highly agree. Do you ever have moments of doubt or cynicism, and how do you combat them?
Well, that's a great question. And it is true. I am committed to positivity. My own personal motto, I think I've mentioned a few times. It's something I aspire towards. It's certainly not something that I can say I've realized it in moments, but not all the time, which is to love everyone and everything all the time. And in fact, I think I'm going to do a monologue or a dialogue with myself about that, because obviously we're human. We all have egos. We get hurt at times. We get jealous. We get angry. It's not as if I never have a negative thought. Of course I do. And combat them. And you asked, Howard, how do you combat them? It's not about combat, because if you try to combat a negative thought, you may be giving it energy in a way. People sometimes say hatred is, love in reverse, or another form of love. The real way I find to deal with negative thoughts is to just dismiss them. Like to say, cancel that thought. I don't have to buy into that thought. Just because it popped into my head doesn't mean I have to own it. Yeah. And I developed a habit of when a negative thought pops into my head, I do that. I dismiss it. I say, thank you, nice thought, goodbye. And move on from those thoughts. Now, sometimes a negative thought can be very persistent. It doesn't want to go away. When you say cancel that thought, it may take a little more energy. So I can't say that I'm perfect or that I know anybody who is perfect about being positive. But the thing is that you can get into, I would call it a positive spiral. The more you cultivate positivity in your life, the more the universe responds to you, I would say, and brings to you more and more reasons to be positive. And of course, I think Emmy would agree with me that what we're doing, bringing into our life interviews with really positive people on a regular basis enhances our positivity. And so the positive spiral just keeps going and going and going. And as a result of that, I've been doing these interviews for 50 years now, over 50 years, in fact. It's gotten to a point where I think of myself, honestly, as possibly the very happiest person I know. And I wasn't always that way. If I look back to thinking about when I was a teenager, teenage years can be very difficult. You're so caught up in how popular you are with your friends at school. I remember popularity was just with myself and my siblings when we were in our preteens and teenage years. Nothing was more important than being popular. And if I felt like I wasn't as popular as I wanted to be with the people I wanted to respect me, I could get despondent about it. And I remember at one time, as a teenager, I think I was seeing the school psychologist for one reason or another. And I said to him, blurted out, I have an inferiority complex. And I know Emmy has been through tough times as well. But you can pull yourself out of those sorts of funky states by your own bootstraps, so to speak, just by being positive, because the more positive you are, the way I often put it is when you resolve to become the best version of yourself, the universe is going to reach out to help you. And that has been my experience for over half a century now.
Yeah. Beautiful words, Jeff. Yeah. And Jeff, you're such an inspiration as far as how you take interest in others. And I think that all of us want to feel important. In fact, I remember Oprah Winfrey, when she was asked, what has she noticed with all the interviews she's done over the years? And she said, people want to know that they matter. And so by taking an interest in others, it allows others to feel special or important, or that they matter, or that they matter enough to have your time. And then when we give people that spotlight, they open up and they share so much. And then they feel happy. And then they in turn are loving back to you or back to myself or whenever, that's why they say, if you're feeling down, go do something nice for somebody if you can. Call a friend, obviously, if you're, all the different ways you can help yourself. But doing something nice for somebody else really can lift your spirit. Bringing somebody flowers, or making them some cookies, or, bringing them some fruit, or doing something nice can really lift their spirits. And then, of course, that lifts yours as well. And also, when you were talking, Jeff, I was thinking I've had the pleasure of interviewing Bernie Beitman, who is really one of the world leaders right now on studying and researching and talking about synchronicities, serendipities, and meaningful coincidences. And he talks about how when you share those experiences with others, that, like Ron bringing up karaoke here, that's a synchronicity. That when you talk about that with others, that it also shows how we are interconnected, and others can then feel more loving and kind, and it can just be reciprocal and continue to go back and forth.
Incidentally, since we're on this topic, I'd like to mention, for anyone viewing right now who hasn't taken the trouble to download a free copy of our new Thinking Aloud magazine, issue number 2 was released just a few weeks ago. And in it, I have an editorial called Unconditional Self-Love, which addresses this whole question of positivity and how you can generate and gender warm, positive feelings towards yourself, towards your deep self, regardless of what anybody else says or thinks or does or feels with regard to you, and even regardless of how you think or feel with regard to yourself. So I want to encourage you to check out that magazine if you haven't already done so. You can order a printed copy if you like, but you can download a free PDF copy. And the reason we're doing that is simply because our philosophy here is to give away as much information for free to people as we possibly can.
Yeah. And here I've got the current issue. This is number 2. We've got Christopher Robinson on the cover of this one. And I don't know if you have any spoilers, Jeff, for the 3rd issue, or maybe not, or any teasers.
Well, we're working hard on that issue right now. The next issue will come out September 1st.
Yeah, great team of volunteers and people helping in that regard.
Now, here's a question from Michael Flanagan, who asks, how do you imagine the community you describe as becoming a participatory one to a greater extent?
Meaning, like, how can more people become more of a participant?
Well, Michael wasn't exactly explicit about what he meant by a participatory one, but I think, we're talking, for example, about higher consciousness, psychic functioning, esoteric culture, intuition. Suppose you're a viewer living in Kankakee, Illinois, hypothetically, and you're excited by what you hear, but you want to become more of a participant. What would you advise to such a viewer, Emmy?
The New Thinking Aloud community or parapsychology? Well, for New Thinking Aloud, you can still volunteer. You can send an email to friends@newthinkingaloud.com if you would like to support what we're doing at New Thinking Aloud. We're always looking for volunteers to assist with various tasks that maybe we haven't thought of, but people are helping out with, for example, these live streams. There's a group of probably about 3 to 5 volunteers right now who are helping pull questions. They're moderating the chat. They're bringing questions over to a document for Jeff and I. It's a really fun experience. There's a group of volunteers who help with the magazine and other areas. As far as being a participatory one in the greater extent, which I think about just, who we are as humans and beings, I think that's a great question, and maybe one, to contemplate as far as, like Jeff just said, or says frequently, and this really goes back to the ancient philosophers, is to know yourself, is to explore yourself, is to understand what gives you meaning, joy, and purpose in your life, and what ways do you want to contribute and to the greater good, where wherever that may be. It may be working at a bakery, or it may be at a flower shop, or it might be volunteering with New Thinking Aloud. So do you have any thoughts, Jeff?
Well, you just held up our magazine a moment ago, and towards the end of this particular issue, we list about 50 or 60 organizations whose mission is compatible with our own. And so we have the New Thinking Aloud community, but we've interviewed, I don't know how many hundreds of guests at this point, and they all have their own communities and their own organizations. And I think you'll find, if you go through that list, that there might be an organization on that list which has a chapter or some sort of outreach in even in Kankakee, Illinois, or wherever you happen to live. And so there's this larger community. It's a groundswell of interest. I think it's probably the single largest demographic group of people who are taking an interest in human potential and spiritual development, or as some people put it, spiritual but not religious is another way to phrase it. But people who are who know that there's a lot more to life than is thought of in conventional mainstream institutions. That's a ground-swelling movement that affects millions of people. And even though we've listed 50 or 60 organizations in the last magazine, there probably could have been 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 times that many, because I'm sure we haven't listed them all. So there are always opportunities for people to get involved. And I'll just close by repeating a statement that you hear very often in esoteric culture, which is, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Absolutely. Yes, it's wonderful that you highlighted all these organizations, Jeff, because I think that many of these organizations can feel like they are separate entities, but you've done a nice job of putting in your magazine all the different various groups that have these similar parapsychological ties. Some of them are the Academy for the Advancement of Post-Materialist Sciences, the Center for the Study of Non-Symbolic Consciousness, Esalen Institute, Berkeley Foundation, Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies, the Jung Platform, the Rhine Research Center, and so on. And so, yes, I'm sure that these organizations would love support as well. And it's great, Jeff, that you've connected everybody in this regard. And there's somebody who asked a question. Oh, I just had it. Oh, here it is. It's Top of the Mountain Gardening is their YouTube name. Top of the Mountain Gardening, what a great name. We used to think and feel something called the human potential movement. Can we relocate it?
Yeah, I don't think it went away.
I don't think so either. I think it just is growing and growing. So Jeff,
Yeah.
you've been to Esalen, I imagine. You've been part of this upswell of this movement for a number of years. What have you seen happen with it over these decades now?
Well, back in the 1970s, when I was a graduate student at Berkeley, the human potential movement was big. And one of the main centers of the human potential movement was the Association for Humanistic Psychology, which I remember it was a wild and crazy organization. I first attended one of their conventions in 1973 in Montreal, Canada, at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel. And these people were in the hotel lobby drumming and dancing. And I think so much so the hotel said, we will never have them back again. And I eventually became the vice president of that organization. I still have close ties with it. But I would say that particular organization is sort of, it was on a growth curve back in the 70s, and I think it's subsided. And the organization has, and many similar organizations from that era have become smaller, not larger. But the mission of human potential has spread. It's because it's no longer being carried by one or two organizations. The Esalen Institute was, of course, very important in human potential. And then there was an outgrowth of the Association for Humanistic Psychology. It became the Association for Transpersonal Psychology, where the human potential people said, we need a spiritual side. It can't be just human potential without spirituality. That has to be central. And we don't want it to be conventional religion. It's the psychology of spirituality. And there was a big conflict when the transpersonal psychology people wanted to become affiliated with the American Psychological Association, as the humanistic psychology people are. And there was a big resistance. They said, oh, you're just trying to bring in religion, and we can't have that. Nevertheless,
because religion and spirituality have nothing to do with psychology.
Well, there's been a tendency in psychology to be hostile to religion, actually. I think a lot of clinical psychologists and research psychologists had, close-up look at some of the negative side effects of religion. I think religion is a very positive force in human society. People who are religious tend to be healthier and live longer and have better relationships. But there's a dark side to religions. I don't want to go into it now. I'll just say it's there. And it has to do with, rigid thinking, judgmentalism, and even sexual abuse. But
and wars, in fact.
Yeah.
In some cases. In some cases. There are plenty of wars that don't involve religion. But
we're wandering a little bit. We originally started by asking about the human potential movement.
Yeah, you were talking about transpersonal psychology going into psychology, and then you said that it was hostile. Yeah.
But in my opinion, you can find almost anywhere you go these days, in schools, in religions, in scientific establishments, and especially in business, people realize that human potential is important, that a job is no longer a question in many, many companies, not all, but many companies these days. It's not about simply putting in your 8 hours a day and taking your paycheck each week. A job, most people realize that if you're going to accept employment somewhere, you want it to be meaningful and valuable to you. You want to grow as a person in your employment. That's why, for example, my wife Janelle has had a career for the last half century working in businesses, teaching people things like communication skills, stress management skills, and surprisingly enough, customer service, how to be able to address complaints. Complaint handling alone is a huge part of being in business. And there's enormous opportunities when somebody comes to you with a complaint to learn and grow as a person.
Yes, because complaints happen everywhere in life, not just in business.
Yeah.
And I know Janelle has been a guest on your program a few times, and a great takeaway I've received from her is that when someone complains, which can be very difficult to do, is to thank them, and then that can kind of help set the tone going forward to come together, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank them for the feedback. Yeah.
It's a wonderful topic, and it applies in personal relationships just as much as in business. So, if somebody is complaining to you about some aspect of your own behavior, it might be a better thing to do is to thank them for the feedback rather than say to yourself, how do I get involved in human potential? The opportunities are everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's my
great answers, Jeff, as always.
Choose a question. Here's one for you, Emmy, from Mike Liss, who asked if he's asking both of us, but I will ask you, do you have a spirit guide, and do you believe we all have guardian angels?
I will say yes and yes would be my short response. For me personally, I feel that I personally don't work with just one spirit guide or guide consistently, although maybe that would be, I think I'm kind of potentially moving in that direction a little bit more, but I'm visited by a variety of supportive beings. And then of course it begs the question of, is that really aspects of myself, or how much of that is really some other types of beings? As far as guardian angels, who really convinced me of that was Lorna Byrne, when I had the great pleasure to interview her on her book, Angels in My Hair. And she says we all have guardian angels. The thing is that we have to ask for their support, and we have to have that intention to connect with them. And then she, even if I recall correctly, says that angels just keep coming here, and that I think she mentioned, Jeff, when you saw her speak, that she talks about how there are unemployed angels because they want to help. But and I just interviewed Norman D. Ellis, who she did her doctorate, actually. Jeff has interviewed her on ancient Egypt. She is an Egyptologist, if that's the correct term, and a poetess. And so her latest book is on the ancient traditions of angels. And she also has talked about how we all have guardian angels, and that in her book, she mentions that humans have free will, but angels, according to her and her research, do not have free will. And so it's up to us as humans to ask for assistance, but that ultimately these angels are assisting on behalf of, if you believe in God or the divine oneness, or all of us connected, our divine higher selves, to assist us as best as we can in our lives. So how about you, Jeff? Do you have a spirit guide, and what are your thoughts on guardian, and do you believe in guardian angels?
Well, I can say that I think I must have guardian angels, because have been so blessed in my life, and not just blessed, but so many times. Maybe it's white privilege. I don't know, but I've done a lot of stupid things, especially when I was younger, and I seem to have avoided practically all of the catastrophic consequences that could have resulted from my own bad behaviors. So I think that I might have had some guardian angels who were working overtime. I don't think they were unemployed, even if it never occurred to me to ask for their help, to be honest. Maybe it's like retrocognitive that I might maybe, now that I'm in my 70s, have looked back and said, I could really use some help back when I was 18. And I call on angels now to help me then.
Yeah.
Because I think time is very different for them. But as for spirit guides, I think spirit guides are probably different than guardian angels. And I think that in my case, I have, most particularly, I did an interview years ago, back in the original Thinking Aloud series, where Marty Rossman, the medical doctor, a specialist in hypnosis, hypnotized me on camera and said, "You are going to get in touch with your inner healing advisor." And what appeared to me was this man wearing a toga. I thought to myself, good. I need to work on my public speaking ability. So I want you to be Demosthenes, the great Greek orator, and you'll help me to become a better public speaker. And the man in the toga said, "No, I'm not Demosthenes." And I asked, "Well, who are you then?" He said, "I'm Seneca." And I said, "Well, good. Now that you're here, Seneca, what would you like me to do?" And he said, "Study my life." And I came out of the hypnotic session with this silly grin on my face, like, what just happened here? And I made a point of studying the life of Seneca, who was an ancient Roman philosopher and playwright. And it's been incredibly valuable to me. I think I felt the same about William James, the founder of American psychology. I don't know if I would call Seneca or William James spirit guides exactly. You could think of them more as inspirations for me. But they seem like, often they do seem like living presences in my life.
Spiritual mentors, perhaps.
Something along those lines, yeah.
You have a connection, deep connection with them.
And I know that other people have told me too, they have this kind of a connection with historical figures that seem very much alive to them and very inspirational.
Yeah. So is it my turn to ask a question?
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is a question. There's actually two viewers who have similar themed questions, it looks like. So Joshua Serino asked, what are your thoughts on the universe being an elaborate simulation? And Jay Silin, or my apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, Silin, do you believe we are in a big simulation of a matrix? And if the answer is yes, how do you think we can let all that go and live fully with our human potentials and with all of our free will? Jeff, I'll let you take that one first.
Well, we've done several interviews on the simulation hypothesis. I find it, from an intellectual perspective, very stimulating. Do I think it's correct? Not exactly, but it's wonderful to think about. And who did I interview recently? Julian Gresser, if I remember. We were talking about the intelligence of the heart, and he described one of his favorite authors, talked about what happens when you die. And he said, okay, you've just died. And he quotes this author as saying, what was that? It's like a whole lifetime can flash in front of you, and you say, what was that? It's as if the world in which we exist, this three-dimensional physical space, is undoubtedly embedded in a higher dimensional space. Any mathematician will tell you that much, I think. The physicists are debating about it. And one of my mentors, Arthur Young, the inventor of the Bell helicopter, never accepted higher dimensions. He said, no, the key is to go down to 0 dimensions. That's where you have total freedom. But however you view it, this three-dimensional world is not the end all. And the people who say that whoever dies with the most toys wins, totally wrong about that. But so there's much more going on than our normal day-to-day life.
Yeah, so
unquestionably, that's the case. And in that sense, you could view it as if it were a simulation, as if we are being projected from some other higher dimension. It might be like when you go to watch a movie, a really good movie, you forget yourself, you become totally engrossed in the movie, and only when it's over do you realize you're sitting in a theater.
Right.
So life could be like that, especially when you take the possibilities of reincarnation into account.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer, Jeff. So then you have lived many years now, and you're still going strong, and we want you to be around for many, many more years. On the note of those who have the most toys wins, since you're suggesting, which I agree with you, is not how you win at life, how do you suggest we can win at life?
Well, it's going to be different for each and every person.
Mm-hmm.
There's no simple formula that's going to work for everyone. That's why Joseph Campbell said, follow your passion. Mm-hmm. And everybody's passion is going to be a little different. For some people, it might be music. For others, might be doing interviews. For other people, it could be mathematics or science. But ultimately, I suppose you want to leave the world a little better in some way than you found it. You want to make a contribution. I'm not a big fan of motivational speakers, but one motivational speaker who impressed me was a guy named Zig Ziglar. He's no longer alive, but his point of view was very simple and straightforward. He was, amongst other things, a sales trainer, and he simply put it this way. He said, you can get whatever you want in life by helping other people get what they want.
Yes. Helping each other. Absolutely. That's how you make friends, right?
Another inspirational quote I heard, and I attended this event once in Las Vegas where Sheldon Adelson was there, who was one of the wealthiest men in America. He didn't start out wealthy. He was a self-made man, as was Robert Bigelow. But I do remember Sheldon Adelson saying, he said, no matter how poor you are, no matter how destitute and low your situation is, you can always find a way to help other people.
Yeah, I've experienced that in my life. I was going through job changes, and I volunteered at a food shelf, and it made me feel better. And I was grateful that I could help people. Absolutely.
Sometimes we get so caught up in our own problems, our own ego, that we forget that there are other people who could use our help.
Right. And then we realize we're not maybe so alone because we all have pain and sorrow and joy. And yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Now, let me mention, you are usually the one to remind me, Emmy. We're near the top of the hour, everybody. We're at the top of the hour, and we're going to continue for another half hour.
It feels like not even 5 minutes here with you today, Jeff. Always a joy to be with you and all the viewers. And these are great questions coming in.
Let me say one thing I like to share with our viewers. They may not realize, because you and I are working pretty closely together. I think it's an interesting little factoid that we've never met actually face to face.
Not yet, but we're going to make that happen.
I'm looking forward to the day, but it's amazing how much we've been able to do together simply by communicating through the internet as we are now.
Yeah, and all of the matrix or the interwebs of non-local consciousness and being in sync with each other, which has been a great joy. So yeah, we've done a lot together. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's your turn to select.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
I think so.
Let's see. Okay, this is from Andrei Slavosh Krasowski. What do you find as the most interesting thing in recent discoveries of parapsychology? Jeff, that's a great question for you.
Well, I guess I'd have to say remote viewing has been, when I first entered the field of parapsychology, the phrase remote viewing didn't exist. Nobody knew that phrase, and it was coined by the people working at SRI International, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, Ingo Swann, really initiated remote viewing and showed they could publish studies in remote viewing. Amazingly successful research conducted at SRI. And of course, we've had Russell as a guest many times on New Thinking Aloud and hope to have him again. He's a wonderful person in the sense that he has his magical power is that other people are successful remote viewers in his presence. And but since then, it's developed into a worldwide movement where there are now, to my understanding, likely something in the order of 10,000 people or more practicing remote viewing. There are dozens and dozens of trainers in remote viewing. It is being applied in financial forecasting. It is being applied in helping police finding missing people, solving crimes. It was used for something like 20 years in the intelligence community. I'm pretty sure that maybe not the United States government officially, but I think other governments are interested in it. And I think unofficially, many people in the government and in the business community know about it and are seeing how they can apply it in their lives. So what that says to me is that as a species, human beings are evolving very slowly, but very steadily toward greater understanding and application of our psychic gifts. Ingo Swann used to say, humans as a whole, as a species, we are not as psychic maybe as certain other extraterrestrial species might be, but we have the potential to become more. In fact, Ingo used to say some of these extraterrestrial species are afraid of how powerful we could become. And so they do things to suppress our psychic abilities. I actually think it's ourselves. We ourselves as a species are a little bit afraid of how powerful we might become. And so we do things as a species to suppress it. So that, if a young child in our culture shows a lot of psychic talent, often the parents will say, stop doing that. We don't want you to become some kind of weirdo. And so children abilities are suppressed, although more and more, like the viewers of this channel, if you have children who show that kind of promise, it's my thought that maybe you'll encourage them. Maybe you'll find ways to help your children develop. And I do think that's happening, that we're beginning to shift culturally so that children are now finding a little bit more encouragement to grow. And there are even careers that are opening up for people who want to practice skills like remote viewing. There's a remote viewing association, IRVA, the International Remote Viewing Association, that now holds annual conferences. When I began in the field, there was no such organization. So the idea that these are gifts that aren't just for the select few, people who happen to be born with an unusual talent and then have to buck society. Now there's much more social support. And there's more of a sense in the culture that even if you think you have no talent whatsoever of a paranormal nature, you'll find many people who said, yeah, I never had any talent, but I took a few classes and I learned to open up that by virtue of being a conscious human being, you do have psychic gifts and you can cultivate them. So that to me is really important. I did my doctoral dissertation on the topic of training psychic abilities. I have a book based on the dissertation called Psi Development Systems. I think it was the first book written within the parapsychology community, or one of the first. I shouldn't make too much of it because there are always forerunners. Writing about how you can cultivate these abilities. And I think the idea that it's possible to cultivate such abilities is now becoming more widely accepted.
Yeah. Well said as always, Jeff. Yes, these are natural abilities we all have that, like you said, when we're younger, they can become squelched. And I know for myself that those abilities were actually encouraged. And in my household, although it wasn't that I trained as an intuitive as a young person and just steadily continued, it was just something we sort of dabbled in, but at least we played with it when we were younger, like guessing maybe the colors or the suits of cards that might turn over, or talking about dreams, or my father had a past life experience that he frequently talked about. So it made it more that these are normal aspects of our consciousness. And when you're talking about the remote viewing growing, and I know, Jeff, you and myself have interviewed many people also in the, obviously, psychology, but also in the health arena. And I was thinking about how you and I recently had a conversation about how important it is in remote viewing to get feedback. And I was thinking about myself having worked and still provide intuitive and energy healing, whatever you want to call it, but being able to know information and help a person without them verbally telling you about it. And I was thinking about in that process, when I'm working with people, that I get feedback. They can tell me if that is a hit or not, if that is correct or not. So I was just thinking about those, the application of remote viewing and how it also can be in healthcare. And I know that people like Wendy Coulter, who's actually done a study on using intuition and in the health and medical arena, and has high statistical significance results in that area, that these can be applied, these skills can be applied in many areas. Yeah, and actually, mentioning Russell Targ, I've also been thinking about, I'm sure, like you said, I'm not the first person to think of this, is that Russell, for example, Alan Steinfeld, who I just interviewed about contact with aliens, he has a video up on his YouTube channel where Russell has something in his pocket. and he asks Alan to use his psychic abilities to draw a picture of what he sees that Russell has in his pocket. And Alan said, watch this video, Emmy, and go ahead and pause the video before Russell reveals what's in his pocket. And I was very close to what the object was. But so that's a video that was recorded probably back, and I'm going to guess in the 80s or so, or maybe even earlier. Is that we have these abilities, and also that Russell has a positive expectation for you. So then it seems, Jeff, can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Or what do you think the mechanism is with that? That might be the special feature of Russell's success with remote viewing.
Well, I think it's kind of intangible.
Yeah.
Maybe the best word for it is charisma.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Emmy, I'm going to ask you a question. Now, you brought up your father, and
Yes.
you mentioned that he had had a past life experience, and I think it's only fair, since you've been so giving and so vivacious on this live stream, to let our viewers know that your father passed away recently, and that in fact, you haven't even held the memorial service yet. So you're right in the middle of processing your life with your father and his passing. And do you want to say anything further about that?
Yes. Well, thank you, Jeff, for keeping it real about life. And yes, it's actually been just under 20 days ago now. I'm looking at the calendar here in front of me that my father took his last breath. At the hospital, only one family member could be there overnight. So one of my brothers was there. I was actually on the phone with my brother when my father took his last breath. So I'm grateful I could in some way be there in his last moments. I will say that my father had Alzheimer's the last couple of years of his life. And even though he had that, and, all of us, I would dare say, are fans of consciousness who are part of this live stream. And I'm sure many of you listening, and I know, Jeff, you've had a family member with Alzheimer's as well, that he was still there in a lot of ways, even through his Alzheimer's. And he still knew our names. He still knew my dog's name when he'd come to my house, which was so sweet. But he would go in and out. And I could see, it seemed that his consciousness would maybe go into another dimension or something of that nature. So I'm grateful for being on this path with you, Jeff, and all the viewers to expand my awareness around this. And Jeff, you also gifted me a book from your library around a person who lost his wife to Alzheimer's, if you want to mention that person in a moment. But I just want to say that while yes, it's very difficult to lose a person you will never see again physically in this world, I do believe that he's happy. I'm grateful for all the people who you've interviewed, and I've spoken to her near-death experiencers, Eben Alexander, William Peters. There's so many that I at least can have peace that I believe that he's very happy, and I've been able to make a connection with him, and I talk with him, and that feels positive. So even though there is the grief there, and I know we all have loss, and I'm letting myself, cry a little bit here and there just to let that out, but I'm also comforted by so much that you have talked about over the years and on New Thinking Aloud. So thank you for that.
Here's a question from Joshua Serino, who asks, what is the role of illness in the context of a spiritual life? Do you want to tackle that one?
I'll tackle it, sure. And I know you probably have thoughts on this as well. So it's my belief that we all come here with certain challenges to grow, to learn to love, to grow within ourselves. And there's a term, I'm sure many of you are aware of it, is an archetype known as the wounded healer. So whether you are actually a professional healer or in that healthcare realm, such as myself or not, we can all grow in greater compassion. Now, I don't want to minimize those who are going through great suffering and pain. And I know that in some situations, it can be very unbearable for people. But I think the general population, I think that role of that illness can take us into a deep dive into ourselves and go on a journey of learning that can enhance our lives. And I know that has happened in my life and the countless people who I've had the honor of helping. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Well, many years ago, I had an insight, which is that we're put on this planet in this three-dimensional universe for the purpose of growing, for the purpose of, I think, to grow and become more loving primarily, and that we have the possibility of doing it joyfully. It can be joyful from start to finish, but that if we don't leap at the joyful opportunities that are presented to us, and many times we're afraid of them, then we're going to grow anyway. And it won't be joyful. We may have to face painful lessons. I think if I've been blessed in life, it's because I did leap occasionally for the joyful opportunities that came. And it's not that I'm without illness. After all, I'm 76 years old, and I think most people who are in their 70s or 80s, gradually you find that, like an old car or something, their parts are going to start breaking down, and they can compound. So, I've got all kinds of issues that one has to deal with, and it's a normal part of getting older. And some people have catastrophic illnesses, and I don't purport to have an answer for all of them. At all, because there's a word, it's karma. I many years ago interviewed a lovely healer, and who said at one time, Irina Tweedy, she was a Sufi teacher, and her guru taught her, he said, we can heal anything, but we can't heal anyone, because people have their own karma, and it goes, well beyond just this lifetime. So the thing that I guess I don't want to be glib about it. That's the real risk when you talk about the role of illness and spirituality is being glib. I don't mean to be glib. I don't wish to be glib. I don't want to be glib. But the truth is that sometimes the most catastrophic illnesses push people outside of the crust of conventional thinking that we all carry with us. Just growing up, we become acculturated to whatever culture. And sometimes it's necessary to just blow off that culture and come face to face with raw reality. You might say even coming face to face with God in a way. And illness can do that for people. It doesn't always do it. There are people who get sick and it's nothing but misery. So I myself recall an occasion in which I had a kidney stone. It was no fun.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. It was like pure pain. I was rolling on the floor in anguish. But and I don't think there was any particular benefit from it until I was given some very powerful painkillers and realized that science can also be a wonderful thing at times. I'll just share one other story. I know we only have about 10 minutes left. But I did have a conversation with Robert Bigelow recently, and he told me something that never came through in the interview. And it was that his mother and his grandmother were both what were called priestesses in the Christian Science community. He grew up as a Christian Scientist. He never mentioned that during the actual interview. But then he shared with me, Mary Baker Eddy, in his opinion, made a terrible mistake when she told people they never need to see medical doctors, that Christian Science or prayer and meditation was all that you ever needed to deal with illness. He said that was wrong, and it's cost people. Who knows how many lives have been lost by people who refuse medical treatment. So, one of the advantages for the human race of illness is that it has furthered our scientific understanding of the human body and how to treat it. Not that I think medicine is perfect. I choose to avoid medical doctors as much as I can, but there are times when I find that they're of great benefit, and there's a lot to be learned from medical science as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I would imagine did you find that you became even more compassionate to people with kidney stones or people in pain after your experience?
One of my meditations, sometimes when I'm feeling pain, I get aches and pains. At my age, almost everybody has some arthritis, for example. When I meditate, I no longer ask for healing for myself. I ask for healing for everybody who is experiencing, if it's a stomach ache or a headache or a painful knee or whatever it is. I try to identify with all the people who are experiencing that problem. And while I'm asking for healing for myself, it's just as easy to ask for healing for everybody else who is experiencing that condition. And when I add up all the little conditions I have, it probably includes most people on the planet. But I find that that's a much more powerful experience in terms of healing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So here's a question kind of related to healing. So this is from Professor G. Do you see any connections between the recent psychedelic resurgence, such as at Johns Hopkins, and the development of psychic abilities or healing? That's a question for you.
as an old psychedelic voyager. Well, I think the new research shows that psychedelics are very promising for dealing with things like addictions and depression. I'm not aware of any research on the use of psychedelics for, other forms of healing. But I will say this, that psychedelics were very instrumental in my life in just, getting on a spiritual path. I think in my early years, I mentioned I did a lot of foolish things. And I suppose, around the age of 18, 19, 20, I was a diehard materialist, really. And psychedelics kind of took care of that, made me realize there's much more to life than just a materialist perspective. And I think it's the case for anybody who finds themselves on a spiritual path, that sooner or later they're going to realize that part of being on such a path is to realize that we all have healing abilities. We have the ability to heal ourselves and others through thought and prayer and meditation. That's a gift everybody possesses. And so psychedelics were very instrumental in me arriving at that realization. So I'm sure other people who are engaged in all the research, and we are experiencing from a research perspective something of a renaissance with regard to psychedelics. I think we can expect many more things in the future, but to my knowledge, at this point in time, none of the research suggests that being high on psychedelics makes you a better healer. It's really a whole lifestyle that's required, not just a psychedelic high.
Mm-hmm. So I know we just have a couple minutes left, and Jeff, you were embarking on some research about weather and Ukraine. So there's some questions coming in around that. Is there anything you want to share about the status of that experiment, or would you rather share that down the road?
Well, I did do a monologue about it, an interim monologue, and things are pretty much the way they were expressed in that monologue, meaning that the results of the study were not statistically significant. However, it does appear as if there was warmer weather in Ukraine, there was warmer weather throughout Europe, and those factors, while not statistically significant, seem to have made a huge difference for the people of Ukraine, and in terms of their ability to sustain their nation in the face of an invasion from their Russian neighbors. And I do plan to give a present. I've been invited to be the banquet speaker for a scientific organization next month, the Society for Scientific Exploration. And I plan to make a more formal presentation of the data then. But for people who are intrigued about where things stand, the most recent monologue on the topic is really where things have been left.
Mm-hmm. And another person whose YouTube name looks like a B or a D, it says Thorn is a letter in the Old English or Old Norse, Old Swedish, Icelandic alphabets. Anyway, they ask, do you have any news from Ted Owens recently that you're willing to share?
Well, yeah, I'll try and be brief about it, because all of this is in two monologues on the In Present series that viewers can check into. I had, when Robert Bigelow was here, I discussed the situation with him, and he offered a very interesting insight that Ted Owens, who wasn't always a positive person, but seems to be, at least we have formed a hypothesis, not a confirmation. The hypothesis is that he's there on the other side. He wants to do good. He wants to continue his demonstrations, and he wants to do it in a way that's positive for people, and also that will be credible from a scientific perspective. So what I hope to do going forward is to find opportunities where we can challenge the deceased Ted Owens, if he's still listening. I can't say for sure that he is, to perform some positive demonstrations from the other side that will be both beneficial to people and scientifically meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the goal.
Wonderful. Okay, we just got a couple minutes left. Do you want to take any more questions, Jeff, or anything you want to share about what's upcoming? Anything else with New Thinking Aloud, or?
Well, I'd like to remind viewers who are not currently subscribers to our weekly newsletter. Emmy and I both work very hard every week to turn out that newsletter, and we've done it consistently now. I think we're up to 168 weeks in a row without missing a single week. It's a wonderful resource for people. The weekly newsletter, which is free, the quarterly magazine, which is free for our viewers. You can sign up for the quarterly magazine at the website of the New Thinking Aloud Foundation. Also, another service we offer, which is free to our viewers on the New Thinking Aloud Foundation website, which is newthinkingaloud.org, is our searchable database. If you have any search term you're interested in, poltergeists or healing or any combination of words, you can enter that into the database. It will take you to the exact spot in any of our videos, in over 1,000 videos, well over 1,000 videos, where that search term is mentioned. But it's not limited only to the New Thinking Aloud videos. We have the videos from many other compatible organizations that are included in our searchable database. So it's a great resource, and I would encourage viewers to take advantage of it. And with that, I think we're out of time. Emmy, do you want to have a final thought to share with our viewers?
I just want to say thank you to you, Jeff, for sharing your stage with me, and also for all of the listeners and viewers for joining us today, for all of the fabulous questions. I see there are many more questions we just simply didn't have the time to get to. It wasn't that they aren't great questions. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more live streams. Jeff actually has let me be in the driver's seat for this live stream today. He taught me how to do this. So thank you all for joining us. And we will have another live stream in a couple weeks with Robert Thurman talking about Buddhism in the West. So we hope you all will join us on July 9th for that.
I might mention also, many people don't know, Robert Thurman was named by Time magazine back, about 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, as one of the 100 most influential living Americans. He's a great Buddhist scholar, a close friend of the Dalai Lama, and a beautiful human being. So I encourage all of you to check out the interview Emmy has already done with Robert Thurman, and join us in 2 weeks for the next one.
Wonderful. Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Lots of love, and bye for now. We'll see you next time.